Hey guys, welcome back. And today we're answering a question and has been asked quite a lot in the press. What's that question you ask? Is it going to be Verstappen's fifth title, which would make him the second person in history to win five consecutive titles after Michael Schumacher? After a very poor end to the first half of the season, everyone thought that Max Verstappen's chances at a fifth world title were definitely out the door. But Monza, followed by Singapore, followed by his defensive races later on, and of course, followed by his perfect weekend at Austin, where there were 33 points available for formerly number 33, which was his earlier number. And now he looks to be within not just fighting range or a foot in the door, but he's actually in the championship fight room itself with the trophy, and he might just snatch it. But vibes aside, what's exactly there? That's what we're here to break down with data, statistics, and analysis. Welcome back to Survive to Drive. But this time, it's not just vibes. Let's actually have a look at what goes behind this and see how it goes. Alan, what do you think? Vibes are enough for this?
No, I'm a numbers guy. I always like numbers. And I think that's what is the premise of this video. I think we had a reporter ask the drivers what they thought were the chances of Max winning the championship. And if I remember correctly, Charles said 10%. There was someone who said 20, I forgot who. Um, and then George Russell famously said 100%, which, I'm all for being a Max fan. But that was my question. When asked what the percentage number was really intrigued because he just gave out random numbers. And I was like, you know what? We can actually compute this. We have the data, we have statistics, and we have models. And models in the real world do things that are a lot more complex than this. So I wanted to give it a go. And we actually computed using statistics the actual probability of Max winning the title. So let's get right on to the analysis, Abhilash. So, Abhilash, we are right onto this question. And let's look at the current driver standings post the USGP, post quota.
I mean, it was a very torrid US Grand Prix for both the McLaren drivers. They both were off at turn one in the sprint, and that basically ruined their race because they could not optimize the setup. They had to go very conservative. Oscar Piastri was behind Lewis Hamilton, and I mean, that should say a lot considering where Lewis Hamilton has been this season. Lando Norris battled Charles Leclerc in what is arguably not a Ferrari, that is a Ferrari. And he eventually did make it P2, but Charles Leclerc did make it a pretty tough job for him to be P2. And regardless, Lando Norris was able to claw back a fair bit of points. I think it was a decent race from him because his setup was not that optimized as well. So from him, we could see, a sliver of maybe clawing back points or pushing, but nothing great. And Oscar Piastri just had underwhelming after underwhelming races, so nothing as such. So Max was able to claw back. If we talk directly to the driver ahead of him, that is Lando Norris, he was able to successfully claw back 8 points in the sprint to Lando, plus another 7 points, so 15 points to Lando. And then for Oscar, it's pretty simple. He was able to claw back even more, about double the points in that case, because P6 gets you 8 points. So, and you talk about the difference from 25 all the way to 8, and you'll be able to see. So 8 and 0 versus 8 versus 33, it's 25 points. That's what he gained against Oscar Piastri in this case, and he's recovered a bigger lead than what Charles Leclerc had to him in 2022, which was assumed to be one of the biggest leads that ever
Yep.
a championship two championship rivals had, that were quite close. So he's done a fantastic job. But I mean, as someone who's looking at it from a data point of view and contextually, because that's what we're going to focus on here, McLaren have had a very bad run of race weekends. So that has also played into Max's hand along with his talent, of course. But upcoming, we have a few rounds. So we have Mexico, obviously, and we have Sao Paulo, which is Max Verstappen's a very good track of his. Las Vegas, where we can expect McLaren to be pretty on the back foot because of their aerodynamic issues. They're not an aerodynamically, they're such an aerodynamically perfect car. It makes a problem for them to actually run in air that that changes dynamics and everything, because it's a very closed off track. So it's not turns where you would have some other natural air coming in. And the other case is of course Lucelle, which I expect McLaren to be fantastic at, given the rear deck and the flowing nature of the track. And Yas Marina is another one where I expect McLaren to be on the front foot ahead of Red Bull. But Mexico and Sao Paulo is all, Mexico and Las Vegas is all to play for Max, and I think he can do the job there. But as for the difference, even right now, the difference is 40 points. Realistically, he has got it a grand total of 5 races. He just, if Oscar Piastri is P2 in every one of them, and even Oscar Piastri wins every single sprint, so there are two sprints left, and Max Verstappen is P2 in the sprint. Even then, Max Verstappen will win the title by a grand total of 3 points. That's my math, but I'm sure he'll win it by a very very small margin. But never say never, because one result of Oscar Piastri on the podium or winning and Max Verstappen in P4 completely flips the script, honestly. But yeah, it's all to play for. 141 points left on the table. Some tracks for McLaren, some tracks for Red Bull. So I mean Verstappen. But let's see. And they've got a raft of upgrades coming in. I genuinely feel they're not on the right track, but if it gets them to a title, why not?
I mean, it's I'm just looking at the numbers. I think the tracks will play a key role. And while you say Vegas and Mexico are to play for, if it rains in Brazil, then again brings Max in the mix. And so even won't count Max out for Brazil. There is Losail and then there's Yas Marina, but maybe if Max dents enough before that, I think it should be good enough. But mathematically, and for analysis, and because math does not know which track is what car's favorite, and we have not figured that in, even though we can make more complex models. For all intents and purposes, all tracks are kind of the same for analysis, but we do it purely from mathematical standpoint. So with 141 points left, Max is 40 points away from Oscar, and Lando is just 14 points away. So the analysis that we carried out is using something called Monte Carlo simulations. This is nothing to do with Monaco or the Monaco Grand Prix. Um, Essentially, in finance, when you want to model the price of an asset, you use Monte Carlo simulations, which just simulates maybe 50,000, 10,000, 1 million times, or 1 million variations or scenarios of how the price can go up and down. So every day, maybe, or every certain time frame, it can either go up or down a certain amount. And then from there, it will go up or down a certain amount, and so on. So that's what Monte Carlo simulations are. They're random simulations, but stochastic, calculated, and just you run a huge number of them, and at the end you can just average it out to find the price of the asset. That's what you do in finance. And then I was like, what if we run 50,000 simulations of the world championship? What if we run it for the next 5 races and see where each driver is? So we're using this idea and this model, using it for F1. And here are the results when we take the equal strength scenario, which is where we take every single driver to be equal in terms of skill, ability, and track, which is not the case. But we're just saying that every driver is equal, and we're trying to predict where they would end up in their final championship points. So each of these lines here, each of them represents what the distribution of the final championship points. So as you can see, all three look like very normal distributions because we have sampled 50,000. We have 50,000 different scenarios that we ran this on, and you can see the spread. So obviously, the blue is Piastri. He will have a higher average spread, followed by Norris, followed by Verstappen, because that's what the current championship points are. And we assume all drivers the same. So, there is an upside. Piastri could finish with somewhere close to 470 points, uh, but he could also, in the worst case, finish somewhere close to 400 or even less than that. On average, it's kind of predicted he ends somewhere around 420 for 30 points. So, similarly for every other driver. In this scenario, this is what we get. Championship belongs to Piastri because he already is in the lead and all drivers the same. 75.59% goes to Piastri, 23.25 to Norris, and Verstappen just has a 1.16% chance. So when the reporter asks, what's the chance of Max winning? It's 1.16%. It's so tiny. But this is where we come to the point that it really is not that tiny. We know who Max is. Max is not anybody else. And frankly, every driver is not equal. So we have a sort of weighting mechanism that we're using to determine which drivers are doing well, and they will get more of a bias in terms of the race points. We asked ChatGPT to sum it up, so it's nice and simple and beautiful for you guys. But very simply, this is using recency. It's a recency weighted strength parameter that we give to each driver. It is weighted exponentially so that newer races matter more. So essentially, we took the last 6 races only, just by the way, for this analysis. And in the last 6 races, we are saying that quota is valued 4 times as much as Hungary. So it just means that quota gets the highest weightage, followed by the race before, followed by the race before that, and so on until we go to Hungary, which means that we are taking recent driver form into account. And so logically, Verstappen's going to be up there because recently his form has been really good, right? But we are actually trying to put numbers to this. And then we normalize to relative ability. So now that we give strengths to each driver, we also want we want this to sum up to 1 across all drivers because it has to be proportionate. And that's how, when we take the relative ability of drivers, that is factored into the calculations. We then inject randomness via gamma draw. So you put into a gamma distribution to avoid the math. And to explain it very simply, it's a weird looking graph. You put it in to find out, to basically sample something stochastically. It is put into a gamma distribution, which is alpha comma 1. Alpha is the product of the concentration constant and S, which is the strength. So the strength that was calculated earlier is multiplied by some sort of a number which determines the randomness. So we want to find out how chaotic a race could be. And finally, once this is done and sampled, we put this and try to get a finishing order for all the drivers, and then we rank them. So that positions P1, P2, P3, and then assign the points according to the F1 system, which is the race or sprint points 25, 18, 15, and so on for P1, P2, P3. Exactly. And this process repeated for 50,000 simulations, and then we estimate the championship win probabilities. This is the mechanism we used. And because not all drivers are equal, we get a very different distribution. Just showing it again, we have Piastri, Norris, and Verstappen. Apologies for the table that's made this way, but if you get the idea, based on recent form, Piastri has an 11.46 score, Norris a 14.01, because we have seen Norris beating Piastri quite a lot recently, and Piastri's lack of form, and Verstappen obviously at 21.01 because max. Once it's normalized, basically Piastri is 1/4 of all the drivers. Piastri's kind of 1/3. Verstappen takes the cake at 0.45. And then, we do some math, we get an alpha, and then this goes into graph and so on. Now, this is more like it. This reflects recent form. This reflects how the drivers are doing, and clearly we can see the how skewed this graph is in favor of Max Verstappen. We can see that it's very unlikely that he finishes with low points. It's not a bell-shaped curve anymore. It is skewed towards performance and perfection, which we know Verstappen really does. Um, Norris is still kind of bell-shaped, but doing okay. Piastri is kind of on the lower end. But now, since these are the 50,000 predictions, we again try to look from here. We basically find out in which of these scenarios does Piastri win the championship or Norris win the championship or Verstappen, which is basically who finishes first in each of these. And when we run these 50,000 scenarios and see which ones who is ahead in, this is what we get. Um, Verstappen close to 90%, taking the cake, 86.665, just zooming ahead of Norris at 8.9, and Piastri to measly 4.435. So we do see the Max Verstappen magic here, doing his thing, and we can clearly see the difference between we can see how much form matters in our calculations. So obviously, there's a lot of other variables we don't take into account, but that's what we get. Um, yeah, Abhilash,
I've
what do
just
you
been
think of
seeing the
the whole
numbers,
thing?
and especially when we're looking at all these simulations and whatever we've been running through, basically we've all been what we've been seeing is that either it's very we're not taking into account recent enough, or we're taking into account it a lot. So like we're looking at the kernel density estimation here in this case, we're having a look at weighted and unweighted. I think the core thing is to understand that data without context is fairly useless. Like we saw Max
Yep,
Verstappen at 1% versus 85%. So we have to find a middle spot for that. And that is what I believe is important from the data point of view. So while we presented a lot of data, I think what's important to understand is that every single track, the psyche of the driver changes. Every single track, the car performs differently. Right now, in the race, the Red Bull might not be as compliant as they were in qualifying. So it's all a matter of if and when and if and but. But these numbers do help us get a fairly good understanding of where we're going. Especially, you can see the graphs, so we can make the graphs, but it's objective at the same time subjective. That's the fun part about F1 data, to be honest.
exactly. I think Abhilash, you touch on probably the most important point. Um, Not just in F1, but anything. And that's what I think Karan Chandak also was raising once during the commentary. Is that engineers come up with a graph and they show it to the F1 drivers and like, oh, you're losing X time on this, this thing, and maybe you can do this on this turn on turn 16. And he says that, but it's about the feel. The driver goes, I'm not confident. The driver goes, I can push. And at some point, how the driver feels is actually so many data points in general that these numbers or graphs kind of don't mean anything.
I
It's
mean,
psychology, it's feel, all of that subjectivity at some point sometimes matters a lot more
yeah,
than
and you're
than
absolutely
hard
right there.
numbers.
I mean, we have so many more graphs prepared to show, but at the end of the day, what goes to show is that you have to think both ways, both number wise and
Exactly.
semantically. Where are you heading? What are you going to be able to do? All of that matters, and all of that is
Exactly.
important. And I
And
think Max Verstappen has a fairly stronger chance now. But if Oscar Piastri does not get out of the slump, I think he does not have a
mhm.
chance. I think he has two hands on that title. And if Norris wins it somehow, God help the world.
Oh God. Well, the three horse race
Alan's just
that
thinking about it, and he's gonna combust.
yeah, please.
If he
And
wins
that's
it,
why I
I
kind of
think
feel
we
bad because
should
I
call
want
him the
Piastri to
GOAT.
win
I think
or
if
or
Lando Norris
Max.
wins this, we have
Yeah,
to officially crown him with the GOAT title.
please. I will never live with it. But um, I think. Yeah, I think, and just for everything, I think the most beautiful point that I want to reiterate is that numbers can never tell the full story. I think, and also, as I will show you ahead, a slight tweak in a certain parameter in a model completely changes things around. Uh, and that is what you can never factor in when it's people, because there's I've taken like three parameters into account. Maybe I've just taken recency and then, done a bunch of transformations. But anything apart from that, the weather, DNFs, um, maybe Max
Engine
just wakes up.
failures.
Maybe Yuki wakes up one day and is like, I'm taking out the two McLarens. None of that is factored in, and you can never take people into account. You can never take, um, I don't know, both McLarens taking themselves out. Maybe
You never know what if
Kimi
Max
comes in
Verstappen
and
takes himself out or someone takes him out.
uh,
There's a huge factor of
but
recency bias in this. Obviously, you have to figure because the thing
mhm,
is, it's very tough to how at what length do you essentially assign weights. You go back currently if we're only taking Zandvoort, you go back two more
yeah,
races, you're basically at Hungary where Max Verstappen had a torrid race. So that
yeah,
assigning weights is very tough because end of the day we're humans and that bias
exactly.
feeds in. You can't just have AI do it because AI does not have the context or the thought awareness that
Yeah.
we have.
And again, so right now it does go back to Hungary, and that's the race that they take. But again, maybe it is older than Hungary. Maybe it really isn't, and you never know, right? So again, this
Exactly.
is kind of it's not a black box because we know what we're doing, but it's just six races, and this model does not know anything before that. This model
Exactly.
does not know that Verstappen is the world champion or that Piastri is a rookie or any other information other than a few numbers that go into a data set, right? So again, very complex, very difficult to determine. But again, let's look at this graph. Let's look at Piastri wins versus points to kind of see um, if each of these drivers had X amount of wins, where would their final championship points be? So, in the equal scenario, we see all of them have the probability of getting 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or even 5 wins. And it's kind of the same. And as you can see, the distribution looks exactly the same for all three, just at different final championship points, right? Because currently they are
The
at a certain
starting
gap.
points are
So it
different.
essentially reflects the same gap. Um, but in the weighted one, because Piastri's been in, torrid form recently, there are no scenarios where there are any more than 3 wins predicted for him. And for Norris, any more than 4 wins. But, we get we get five. For Verstappen, I think this also counts sprints, so we get six as well.
Exactly.
Uh, and that is kind of how we get to these certain points. We also have the weighted and equal scenario for
Basically it's
these
going to take into
drivers.
account how many points they're able to get on the basis of the GPs and the sprints because we have two sprints coming up but we have five Grand Prix. So considering that, how much of an advantage does it give you? Because remember, in the sprint, if you are DNFing and if you are winning, the difference is only 8 points, but in the race, if you are DNFing and the other person wins, it is 25 points. On the other hand, if you want to have the same point loss as a sprint, that is an 8 point loss. You can only afford to be P3 at worst. That in itself is exactly that is a 10 point loss. So you can afford to be only P3. A P2 itself is a 7 point loss. So that's a closer one. So the difference is that in a sprint, you can run literally a test setup. You can change every goddamn thing you want and you can have the same loss as just about being second. So basically, the amount of points that Verstappen gained from Norris and Piastri in the sprint is the same amount of points that Verstappen gained to Norris because Norris just even if Norris was P2, in the race. So it just goes to show that the race has a lot more weight as compared to a sprint, because simply because the points distribution is so much less in the sprint. You only get
Yeah.
8 points for the winner, and it only goes till eighth place, and the difference is just one. Whereas in the normal scoring system, it increases. It gives you more bias that, if you win, you are at a better advantage. So that is why basically a Grand Prix must count a lot more than a sprint. And you can take sprints for granted, but you cannot take a Grand Prix for granted. Obviously, points are great whenever you can come by them, but you sometimes have to make strategic advances and make a tactical
I
retreat.
mean,
And have
points,
a look.
and I think this is what we will remember maybe if the championship goes down to the wire. Um, is that every points matter and every point is key, and we probably don't have to look at that way. And maybe drivers don't look at it this way because we all remember Piastri at the start in Australia, clawed back to get 2 points. Um, right? And maybe if he wins it by 2 points, maybe that's what saved it. Rather than being like, oh well, shucks, I'm out. He was like, never mind, and got back to P9. So again, every point matters, but clearly what this shows is the equal scenario and the weighted scenario and the equal scenario, because there are 50,000 observations at some point, it will all even out. So every drive will be kind of the same after we take so many different variations. And so there will be the same points on average for how many points they get after these 5 races from the GPs and the spins. An important note here is that apart from the top 3 drivers and then Russell and Leclerc who's out of the championship, and
I
Russell
love how
who
optimistic the
will soon
graph
be
is
out.
that it has Leclerc in the contention. It's like
It
that
really
one
does not
kid
have
who's
him in the
there with the
contention.
adults, like, yeah, I'm just happy
So,
to be
so it
there.
doesn't actually have him in contention. So I really want to clarify this. But again, we wanted to have 6 drivers that were really making an impact in the championship, which I think are Russell and Leclerc. I think are still in the fight for most races, and so even Russell and Leclerc got points. The weighting and the bias and the points that we did, I think these two still get it. But all the others have been bunched in a group called the others, which for our analysis is just another driver, which is called others, which kind of just averages out all the scores of the other
It's
drivers.
amazing
So,
how others, which also includes
yeah,
sober drivers, have a better chance, better weightage than Charles Leclerc. He just goes
yes.
to
I
his
mean,
entire
that's
weightage.
also because
Yeah,
in
the
a
data
way
points and
it's
everything.
every other driver. So,
Yeah,
it's
but just
five,
so ironically
15
right
other
with Charles
drivers.
Leclerc,
Yeah.
just so ironically correct for him.
I mean, it's also more than Russell, honestly. But actually, just Verstappen takes the cake. Others is higher than Norris and Piastri if you
And
look at.
Piastri.
So
It just goes to, I mean,
so
the point is data, but of
yeah.
course,
So yeah, but I mean, it is also kind of fair because it includes 15 other drivers. So 15
exactly,
other drivers getting somewhere around 80 points in the rest of the championship is, I think, pretty doable, pretty fair. Right?
exactly.
Um. Anyway, as we go on to the next graph, this is just showing that with the more number of simulations, it is kind of steady. We don't really change much in terms of the probability. So this is just showing whether it converges or changes, and no, it doesn't. We still have Verstappen straight up at the top, in the weighted scenario, and so on. So it's kind of stable. Once even if we run and we go on and extend the simulations to more and more of them, maybe go to 100,000, it's still going to be the same. Uh, so yeah, ideally we're saying that Max wins, or we hope that Oscar doesn't bottle it, and we are all happy. This message was added by me because, well, I'm not a Lando fan, but yeah. Final thoughts, Abhilash?
Now I'm a Lewis fan, as people know, and I'm kind of
Yeah, well,
considering what do we want as a victory? Do we want
you're
a
4 years
McLaren
too late.
victory? Do we want a McLaren victory? Because we really don't want that. Because that would not that Lewis Hamilton is currently the last WDC winner for McLaren, so
Yeah,
that would be a bad
yeah.
stack for us. But if Max Verstappen wins a fifth one, he's just that closer to us. So I'm kind of at odds at this point. What do we even want? So I mean, taking the real coming
Well,
back to
maybe
my
maybe you want
non-biased point,
Lewis's eighth,
the happy
but you're
thing
not
would
getting it.
be we have Lando Norris win and the entire world just combusts.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the happiest
That's
thing we can do, because
that.
I mean, that's not even happy for me, because then Lewis Hamilton won't be the last British world champion. So, and nor will he be the last ever McLaren drivers world champion. But if Norris just wins, I would like that chaos. Oscar fans coming up with
Please,
the wildest reasons.
I'm no George Russell fan. I'd rather have George win. Very
How would
honestly,
George celebrate a title is interesting to think.
but it's okay. But I mean, this is just an intro, not just to F1, but to statistics for a few people who, yeah, trying to get into statistics.
Absolutely.
Numbers are cool. Numbers are great, and there's also one graph that, oh, I think it got deleted. But again, I think the idea that we get, which is very interesting, is this thing called randomness. In the S times C that we put into our distribution, our gamma distribution, there is a factor called C, which is called the concentration factor. Now, this is something that I have to choose arbitrarily. And the concentration factor that I chose was 100, because that is on average what gives a pretty standardized result, right? But this
Absolutely.
range goes from 0 to infinity. And essentially, what this C does is that if it is a very high C, so if I take somewhere close to a million or whatever, it's going to give a predictable race. In terms of predictable, it's mostly going to be Max in the weighted scenario, Max followed by Lando, followed by Oscar, and the drivers in terms of their strengths. But as soon as you change the C to something else, it brings in chaos basically, right? So you reduce it, and we have in some we have Nico Hulkenberg winning for some. I mean, probably not going to happen. So obviously, if you choose a very low C, it increases the concentration factor. It changes a bunch of stuff. Um, so this is also to say that at the end of the day, statistics are just numbers, right? If I just choose a different C, it's going to be different. Max is not going to be at 86%. And this number I don't get from anywhere. This is not real data. This is not F1 data. It is just a run number I picked up randomly and put it in my model and thought, yeah, this kind of works. So this is a reasonable estimate. There is no other way to replace this number, but this is just a friendly reminder. The numbers are just numbers. Remember, what you feel and your gut feeling is the best thing ever. And at the end of the day, numbers can only take you so far. That's all,
Exactly.
folks.
That's all we have from
Good night.
our
Have a
point.
good
Good night. We're gonna
whatever
watch
day,
a little bit of fun right now.
and enjoy this Formula One season, because it's cooking
Enjoy,
a
guys,
banger no
and
matter what's
we'll see
happening.
you with something very exciting coming up. See you guys.
Perfect.
Bye bye.